Well, as we slowly get to Iran, and on your point about affordability and accountability really needing to be the message that the Democrats stay focused on, we had, for example, since Easter Sunday and through today, really some would call profane posts by the president. And I just wonder how that fits into staying focused. The Easter Sunday message, the president threatening to decimate a civilization, and then just, I think, overnight posting himself as Jesus. Does reaction to that fit into the message? And what is your reaction?
Absolutely. I mean, we need to hold leaders accountable for what they say as well as what they do, because words, especially from an American president, have real consequences. And when you look at the last week of unhinged rants coming from Trump's social media account, it's just disgraceful. I mean, threatening civilizational genocide, threatening Pope Leo, threatening the values. You know, I want to get back to this point. You know, you hear Trump and Vance and these people prattle on and on about Western civilization. I don't think they've ever taken a course in Western civilization. I was lucky enough to take one at Wellesley College all those many years ago. And Western civilization has a real meaning. It is a meaning about our values, our institutions. This country of ours is a result of the development over centuries of Western civilization. It is about how we hold leaders accountable so they don't become autocrats and dictators, and how they don't lead us into, you know, reckless wars and really unhinged attacks on, you know, the first American pope. So, yes, accountability is a very broad concept. It's not just about holding people accountable for the crimes that they've committed, maybe the bribes that they've taken, the kind of, unaccountable power they've exercised. It's also about holding them to a standard, and the standard should be American democracy, our institutions, the rule of law, how we conduct ourselves. And it's not just about the laws we pass, but the norms that we follow, all of which have been broken by this president. So I read those, like, I think, I hope the majority of Americans, both shaking my head and really just feeling sick at heart that we have a president who is such a disgrace. And it's about what we should stand for that he positions himself against, using slogans like Western civilization and admiring somebody like Putin who wants to destroy Western civilization. So let's be really clear about what accountability means here, and let's start holding him accountable for what he says and what he does. And, of course, we have to wait for an election, but there are a lot of people around him who I think need to be held accountable right now for the behavior that they're engaged in and what they are leading us toward.
Let's talk about Iran. Would love to get your insights on the war. Obviously, you've always understood and you've always clearly said that Iran has been the epicenter of international terror since 1979. They have the blood of Americans on their hands. And I know you have great fears, like everybody else, about a nuclear Iran. But let's talk about where we are now, how we got into the war, and how we get out. Talks obviously took place over the weekend. It seems to me the two issues, intractable issues, remain the Strait and Iran's nuclear program. If you were Secretary of State today, what would be your next step following the talks in Islamabad?
Well, there is so much damage that's been done by this administration to achieving those two goals that it's going to take a lot of hard work. And, you know, Joe, let me just say this. When I was Secretary of State and beginning the secret negotiations with Iran to try to reach a nuclear weapons deal to prevent them from ever having a nuclear arsenal, it was a very slow, deliberative process. This is hard work. You don't just show up in Geneva or Islamabad talk for a bunch of hours and go away. This is hard, disciplined effort that has to go into diplomacy to reach any result. And I don't see this administration either wanting to do it or, frankly, being capable of doing it, because they send the same three people around the world, two of them, Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, they're supposed to solve Ukraine, Iran, Gaza. It's a joke, because from what I'm told and what I've read in public accounts, the offer that was made by the Iranians in Geneva was not adequate, but it served as a starting place beyond which, as Jonathan Powell, the British National Security Advisor, said, we expected the Iranians to start with. But that would require sitting in a chair for hours, as we did to get the first agreement. That seems to be something that Trump and his people are unable to do. So you would have to wipe the slate clean. You would have to bring in people who actually know something about nuclear weapons. We had physicists, nuclear weapons practitioners at the table when our administration was negotiating for the JPOA. You need people who know something, who know the history. It's shocking that Trump said nobody told him that Iran might close the Strait of Hormuz. Every war game I was ever involved in, that was the first thing we assumed Iran would do. So we're in a situation now where we are weak, where we essentially have lost the leverage and initiative that we had. I supported Trump bombing the nuclear sites back in June. I thought that was an appropriate and limited strategic objective. I opposed his incoherent attack on Iran, and I also know from personal experience how Netanyahu has tried to get every American president to agree to have an open-ended war with Iran, because I had many, many hours-long conversations with him and his war cabinet about this, and refusing to go along with a very inchoate desire to do something to Iran that with no real end state that could be described sufficiently. So now here we are. I think you've got to get back into hard negotiations with the right people at the table who know what they are doing. And I think then you've got to make it very clear we want our allies involved. We don't want to be dissing our allies because they have a big stake in this. When we did the original talks, we had the P5+1. The original members of the Security Council plus Germany. But it was a real negotiation. So I worry that the United States is now in a very weak position vis-a-vis Iran, which should be the outlier, should be on the back foot, and should be the one held to account.
So you mentioned our allies. I'm curious, NATO allies, our friends. How do you, from the many people that I know you speak to, how do our allies feel about us right now, and what is the concern moving forward? And given the void that you see, that you say you see at the negotiating table with this war in Iran and the patterns of this commander-in-chief, then where is this headed?
This is what worries me the most, Mika. A quick point on the allies. It was a good day for NATO and the EU with the Hungarian election, because the new leader immediately said we're going to get close to the EU and NATO. Not that he's going to agree with everything. That's not expected, but we're going to be back in an alliance. We're going to be working together. I think our allies believe we've lost our mind because they wake up in the morning like we do and see the rants from the President of the United States, the figure of, such authority, making no sense half the time. So I think the allies have come to the realization they've got to strengthen the EU. They have to strengthen their own defenses. They have to strengthen their position with Ukraine to prevent Putin, and it's at a stalemate, which is, good for Ukraine, and we've got to make sure that they continue to defend themselves and are not pushed into some, surrender deal by Trump. But the bigger question is, what does Trump do now? I teach a course at Columbia University with the dean of the School of International and Public Affairs. We've been on your program. And among the things we teach is behavior of leaders. And there's something called domain of loss, which means when a leader feels that he's losing, he actually becomes more reckless. And I fear that with Trump. You know, he's found the joy of ordering our military to go do things that give him a lot of dopamine, I guess, when he's in the Situation Room watching them, you know, take out Maduro from, you know, Venezuela or attack Iran or whatever. I just worry that he's going to become more reckless, and this is a call to the Congress, including the Republicans, to step up and do your constitutional duty. Rein in this president before he causes absolutely irreparable damage to our country, to our military standing, to our authority and leadership. Do not let him continue to be a rogue player in the international arena, because I fear he will get more reckless. And I will tell you, when we win these midterm elections, because, look, if the elections were today or next week or the following week, we would win both the House and the Senate, and I hope that's what happens in November, both because I want to see change, but also I want to see him held accountable. And so let's do it now, because I'm not sure we can wait and allow him, you know, free range to, along with his buddy Hegseth, to, you know, tell our military to go do things that are not even in the interests of the United States, as well as breaching, you know, the laws of war. So, look, I worry a lot about how more irrational and unhinged he could become.
Let's talk about Israel. You spoke briefly about Netanyahu and Israel. I know you've always been a strong supporter of Israel. You've spoken out aggressively against anti-Semitism. You've, in fact, been attacked time and time again when you give speeches because people believe that you are too strong of a supporter of Israel. And yet, I've heard you and President Clinton talk about the tragedy of how far Netanyahu has taken us from where the Clinton administration had us in the Oslo Accords, where there was an extraordinary deal for the Palestinians that they passed up on, which led to the saying to begin, the Palestinians never pass up an opportunity to pass up an opportunity. That said, here we are all these years later, and Netanyahu continuing an endless war, the bombing of it seems like half of Lebanon. We saw what happened in Gaza. Every day, horrors being visited upon the people of the West Bank. Talk about the real damage that Benjamin Netanyahu is doing, not just to the region, but also to Israel. You've seen how a majority of Americans have now turned against Israel. In our time, that was unheard of, Madam Secretary. What's the future for Israel?
Well, you've done a pretty good summary of the problem, Joe. I do support Israel. I am a staunch supporter of Israel, and I am a staunch opponent of Benjamin Netanyahu. He has stayed too long. He has, in my view, undermined Israel's long-term security, and I am, very worried about what's happening. When people say, well, you've got to support Netanyahu, if you are, pro-Israeli or Israel, well, I say, look, I love America, and I am really opposed to Donald Trump. Does that make me anti-American? I don't think so. It makes me a fair observer, in my view, of assessing what is in the best interest of my country, and I feel the same way about Israel. Now, look, I think there has been a very important effort to push back and to defeat the axis of enemies that Iran put together, Hamas, which, remember, started, the terrible sequence of events back on October 7th of 2023, and Hezbollah. But we see Hezbollah is not by any means defeated because we're engaged in a war now in southern Lebanon. I would wish the following. Number one, and finally there seems to be some opening here. I've been advocating behind the scenes for this now for several months. Israel should support this Lebanese government. There has not been a better Lebanese government since the Syrians and Iranians assassinated Hariri. They are trying. Do they have all the capacity they need? No. But they are trying to set up a government in Lebanon that can deal with the threat that Hezbollah poses internally to Lebanon. And so rather than making their task even harder, work with this new government in Lebanon. See how far you can help them to go to disarm Hezbollah, to create better conditions for a lasting, secure peace between Lebanon and Israel. And for heaven's sakes, rein in the settler violence. It is unacceptable. The West Bank is filled with people who want a better future for themselves and their families. Let's help them with that. Let's make it more likely that they could be, allies instead of adversaries. But if you're going to continue to blow up their homes and allow people to destroy their olive groves and everything else that is going on now, you're just creating the next generation of people who are going to hate what is next door to them in Israel. That is no way to try to create a secure Israel going forward. Let's accelerate what we need to do in Gaza. And yes, Hamas needs to be disarmed. One of the, ongoing challenges is how that is going to be done. Let's focus on that. But look, ultimately the Israeli people will have to decide who their leaders are. And I hope, like the people of Hungary, they realize that, their economy has been, undermined. Their unity within Israel has been put at risk. Their security and safety is not yet what it needs to be because they have leadership that is not going to, in my view, act in the best interests of Israel and the future of Israel. So, when you care about people and you care about a country, you want to see the best for them. And I think anyone who is criticizing the Netanyahu government has every right to do so. But let's not forget that, Israel itself has lived in a very dangerous neighborhood for a very long time. It deserves our support, separate and apart from Netanyahu.
Thank you for this extended and wide-ranging conversation. Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, thank you very much for coming on the show this morning.
Thank you both.
We appreciate it.
Next time I'll try to be there in person. I always love coming in and talking to you both. Take care. Bye-bye.
Anytime. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.